Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlawn Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlawn Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Sandy Masin returns. Sandy's been a guest on numerous occasions. She served in the legislature for District 38A for 4 years, and of course we now have redistricting, so we're now in District 51A, and she's running against the existing representative, Diane Anderson.
Exactly.
And I have to say, as a preface, that Diane Anderson has been invited on numerous occasions to be a guest on this program and or to debate, which Sandy has indicated she would be happy to do, but has not responded in any respect in that regard. So we have one side of the political spectrum, and since that's the only side that seems to be interested in presenting itself to the voters and to the people and to our viewers, that's the side that we go with. And Sandy, welcome back.
My pleasure. It's always great to be here.
Now, you're running, and you do have a primary. By the time people see this, the primary will be behind us. Mm-hmm. We're assuming that the primary is a thing of the past in your case, and you're facing an incumbent in this situation who has accomplished what during her 2 years in the legislature?
Well, I would say the most important thing she accomplished was voting, being part of the state shutdown and the incredibly irresponsible settlement of the budget last year.
Okay, now, you were too laid back. I want you to be more aggressive. Part of the state shutdown, the Republicans in the legislature forced a shutdown of the state, the longest in the state's history, that cost us millions of dollars, and to no avail.
Right.
She voted for that.
She supported that, yes. And when I was in the legislature, that not having a shutdown to me was something that was extremely important to me. So I mean, I voted to make sure that the government continued. And I think that's, from what I'm hearing as I'm campaigning, that is really important to people. And I'll use this illustration of a man that I talked with the other day, and he identified himself as being an independent. But he said, you know, you vote for somebody that you think is intelligent, that is going to represent your interest, and then they get there and they act like a bunch of kids. They can't get along, they can't get the job done. It's like kids playing in a sandbox. And that, to me, I think is what I'm hearing again and again. People are very, very upset with the gridlock. And I would say, when I'm at the doors now, I would say the fact that the legislature didn't get anything done and the fact about the gridlock is probably comes up as much as job creation and the economy.
Well, I've called it a do-nothing legislature.
Exactly.
And basically it is a 2-year do-nothing legislature, because on the important things, they really didn't get things done. Even, and it's an example I've used before, the governor put forward a very ambitious, package to replace our infrastructure A bonding bill, they slashed it by a third. Where we could have put thousands of people back to work.
Exactly.
We could have handled so many problems in this state. The bridges, 90% of which are dangerously, and we know what bridges can do when they fall and how deadly that can be, in need of repair. But this legislature honed in on issues of no substance to the people, as far as I can see.
And that's, well, I'll say two things, and I know I've heard the do-nothing legislature many times, but in my mind, they did more. They did do something. They actually placed, in my mind, they placed Minnesota in a much worse position than we were before. I mean, when the way that the budget was settled, where they did the huge school shift. I mean, we now owe the school districts something like $2.4 billion. That's a lot of money. And many of the school districts are taking out on loans. So that means taxpayers are going to have to come up with the extra money.
Or pay levies for the school districts so that the schools can continue to provide the type of education we're used to in this area.
Right. And then, you know, the fact that they were going to take out loans against the tobacco settlement funds. Again, that means extra. We're taking out loans that we're going to have to pay back. So taxpayers' money are going to have to come up with that, and that's worth nothing. Whereas if they had actually done something, a physical structure, infrastructure, we'd have something to show for it. And I think, you know, I guess many times I use the examples of what happened after the Great Depression, where, you know, the government actually put people to work to building things. And when you go throughout the country, you still see remnants of what they built. I mean, we're enjoying the artwork, we're enjoying some of those parks, etc., even today. And what are we going to have to show for this? Nothing.
Well, I think as I was reading the voting rolls, that your opponent voted straight down the line with the Republican Party.
It was something up there like 99%, yes. So it's, you know, she obviously was in full support with a lot of these negative actions that occurred during the past 2 years.
I recall when you were in the legislature, you voted your conscience. You didn't always vote the party line, sometimes angering members of the party, but you represented your constituents, and that's what you were elected to do.
That's what I was elected to do, and that's what people expect you to do.
Now, one of the things in the campaign literature of your opponent says that this legislature erased a $5.1 billion deficit without raising taxes. Now, I know that to be a lie, L-I-E,
exactly.
Plain and simple. Talk to that.
Okay. Well, as I said, I had already mentioned the fact that they did that major school shift. So we owe the school districts $2.4 billion. And that has got to be paid back. I mean, there is legislation that says the state has to pay that back. So eventually we're going to have to pay that back. And then to also use take a loan out on the tobacco settlement funds was, to me, fiscally irresponsible. And I guess that's why I have trouble understanding why sometimes people are accusing the Democrats of trying to spend money. I mean, here, this is money that is a total waste. It is accomplishing nothing because they didn't want to solve the problem.
And we have to pay interest on this money to pay it back.
Exactly. And that to me is the criminal part. We're taking it, you know, we're taking away from our kids because these people were not willing to take a vote.
The fact of the matter is, the deficit went down in large part because we received a much larger amount of money from the federal government than we had anticipated.
Exactly.
Is that so?
That is true. I mean,
so this legislature, when they put out a piece of literature that says they erased the budget, that is, as I just said, that's a blatant lie. We get money from the feds, and they all talk about the fact that they don't want to deal with the federal government and this and that, but we'll take the money when it comes in.
And that, you know, and I think that's the piece that people, and many people do understand this now. I mean, it's what happened is actually, they balanced it on paper. There is going to be a deficit next year. There's no question that they didn't.
Wait, she says here that they generated a $1.2 billion surplus. Is
Well,
that another spurious statement?
I would say that you wouldn't hire some of these people for your CPAs, right? and that is, yeah, that is where we're talking about people maybe misusing information. And well, you said it was a lie, and I'm thinking most people understand that.
They say, passed a major package of tax reforms to improve job growth. What did this legislature do to improve job growth?
That, I think, it's hard for me to understand that, and that's what, you know, when I'm door knocking, that's what I'm going around saying. To me, they have really done nothing for job creation in the last 2 years. And that's what people want. They want jobs. They want the economy to be better. And they saw literally nothing coming out of this legislature.
Cutting the bonding bill by a third takes away from job growth.
Right.
It takes away from contractors who could go to work. It takes away from people who work for the contractors who could go back to work. It takes away from putting more money into our, really, the stream of money that keeps us going.
And it also, yeah, they also cut down some programs that help with people getting jobs. So I mean, that to me is just, it's a statement I truly don't understand, and I do think that is not, that's not quite truthful.
Where did she vote on the Viking Stadium?
She did vote against the stadium.
She voted against the Viking Stadium, which the governor, and are we so fortunate to have this man as governor?
I think he's
which
going
the
down
governor
to sainthood, yes.
Worked so hard at and brought the parties together, because the almost $1 billion Viking Stadium is another situation where jobs are going to be added to the community. It's going to improve certainly hotels, it's going to improve restaurants, it's going to add jobs in so many aspects. And I know people felt both ways about the stadium, but the fact of the matter is, when you talk about job control, job creation I should say, voting for the stadium means voting for creating jobs. Voting for the stadium means you are helping the economy in that regard. And I know that's what really, really motivated the governor and the people who voted for it and passed it. She voted against it.
She did. And actually, it was interesting because I had door knocked at home where she had been before me, and that's what the gentleman said. That was one of the issues that was important to him, because he saw it as a job creation, a vote. And so then when she said no,
well, I think an interesting quote from your opponent on one of her pieces of literature that I've seen is that she's proud of her record over the past 2 years and plans to focus on many of the same issues. Well, that's a quote right out of her campaign literature. If in fact she's going to focus on the same issues that brought us to a stalemate, that brought us no progress, what she's telling us is it's going to be the same old if she's reelected.
And that's, yeah, and that is a very good interpretation, and and I think that's part of the message that we need to get out. If people want Minnesota to be moving forward, we need to have a legislature that wants to work, that wants Minnesota to move forward, and certainly that is able to negotiate and compromise with a governor who has been really open in many, many cases. And again, at the doors, I mean, this one woman said she didn't vote for Dayton, but she really believes he's done a good job and that he is trying to work for Minnesotans. And that's the thing that we need to concentrate on. Do we want Minnesota to just kind of go through this same gridlock for another 2 years, or do we want somebody and a legislature in there that is going to work with the governor, that is going to make a change for Minnesota?
It's the only way we can have progress is to work together. Unfortunately, there is a mindset that feels that we must be at loggerheads, that we must be partisan about everything. But that mindset forgets the obligation to the people of this state. That forgets that we are very fortunate to have a governor who has taken the stands that he has taken on so many things to protect the people of the state. I don't understand it. I don't comprehend it. I understand she also voted to privatize Minnesota Care.
Well, definitely her, and that's an interesting thing, because it seems to me well, I know she was on the Human Services Committee, et cetera, and she did work for many of them, but yet her positions on health care reform seem to be at odds with what's going on and what most Minnesotans expect.
And let's talk to that more.
Okay.
What do Minnesotans respect, and what's going on in health care?
Okay. I can tell you, first of all, people, and I'm going to concentrate mainly on the federal health care. I mean, certainly, I believe the Minnesota health care plan that I had signed on when I was in the legislature, it may be a little bit better than the federal health care, but I do know that people right now, they are extremely pleased the fact that their children are able to stay on their insurance until age 26. I mean, we know that so many kids coming out of college right now, they're not getting jobs.
Opposed by the Republicans.
Exactly. And then I think what got a lot of press recently is some of the changes that are really impacting women's issues as far as health care, where they will have more coverage now. And these are,
Where does your opponent stand on women's issues? Where does she stand on abortion?
Well, we definitely know that she supports the pro-life.
Where does she stand on stem cell research?
I believe she is against that one as well. And she also had a bill, signed on to a bill that's against the cloning as well. So, I mean, it seems, again, the anti-science movement is...
So this is a woman who is basically voting against issues and bills that would make things better for women.
Exactly. And certainly, if people want to check my website, you can see that I do have backing from several women's groups. I mean, and I've been fighting for women's rights all my life, it seems like. And so to see these last couple of years, to see where they're trying to turn back these rights.
We're trying to go back into the 50s
exactly.
with this mindset.
Right.
Instead of going forward to 2050, they're trying to take us back to 1950.
Exactly.
And we have made such strides over the years, including civil rights, and I know she has certainly some reservations about some areas in civil rights. So let's get to the things that this legislature did accomplish. They accomplished bringing forward a constitutional amendment which they call voter ID. I call it voter suppression.
Exactly.
Because what it would do is place an undue burden on the elderly, of which I am one, on students, on service people, on certainly people who have physical disabilities.
Exactly.
To be able to vote, or to be able to vote absentee. She voted in favor of putting that constitutional amendment in front of the people.
Again, it's something that well, maybe I do understand, but I don't approve of. But normally, I believe that we live in a country where everybody should be part of the government, and we were always doing more and more to help people to be part of the process. So
we encourage them to vote. We encourage them
exactly.
to get involved in the system.
And so for this, I do know is going to be difficult. Naturally, I was working with a disability group not too long ago, and I mean that was one of the issues that we were
Which
covering.
is one of the things you have done over the years, by the way, is work with the disabled.
So I mean, how do you explain that to somebody who's trying to make their life so much more difficult? And maybe that they don't understand how difficult it is for some people to get from one place to another. Some of us are very fortunate.
Well, I think they do understand. I think they do understand, and I think it's a calculated move to keep those people we see it happening all over the country by Republican legislatures to keep people from exercising the franchise, because the people that they would try to keep away are the people who might most likely be voting against the Republican Party, Democrat, or for other parties, and they want to keep those people from the polls, which to me is devious and scurrilous.
I absolutely agree with you. And I'll just use an example. I mean, my mother never ever had a driver's license. She never drove. So okay, and she is no longer living. But if she, if this had happened when she was alive, it took. I mean, I was already married before I finally got her a birth certificate. So she didn't have a driver's license. She didn't have a birth certificate.
My mother didn't either.
And so for people, once they get to be maybe not as mobile as they once were, and if they're and many of us have health issues that make it incredibly difficult for transportation. And actually, I remember this one woman who had given up her driver's license because her eyesight was not quite what it should be, and she was thinking of getting back because it was so difficult for her to get rides to where she needed to do that. So I mean, we're encouraging people to do things that are against their best interest and actually against the best interest of society. I mean, as you said, why wouldn't we want everybody to be participating in this government?
We are also an agricultural state. So many people were born on the farm with midwives. There was no county clerk there. There was no registration of a birth certificate. To keep them from exercising the franchise that they have exercised all their lives is in and of itself criminal.
And
so,
exactly, there's some churches, there's some old city halls that have burned down with the records. So it's not as easy as it sounds for those who have been, if we live in the metro area where everything's pretty much stable. But yes,
and of course that bill is still in front of the courts, and I'm hopeful it'll be struck down because they never said what kind of a voter ID.
And that's that is even scarier, is the fact that whatever is going to happen, the real details aren't going to be known until after the bill passes.
We have a state called Texas, where your NRA card is sufficient for voter registration, but your college student ID is not sufficient for registration. I mean, talk about ludicrous.
No, that's a really good example. I mean, well, Texas does a lot of
bizarre,
unusual things, to say the least, because I used to work for the
bizarre.
Department of Corrections, and I remember asking somebody, because we know even today, recently there was that example of somebody that was on death row. He had I mean, he definitely was not a fully functioning, intelligent human being, and yet they are putting people on death row that really should be in mental institutions or have some other institutions. What they're doing is criminal. And that's, and you've probably seen a lot of emails and people that were upset by that. And I just don't understand how you can condone that type of activity.
Well, I can't. Now, another thing that this legislature accomplished, and I say that in quotes, they passed a bill, and there is a law in this state that says marriage is between a man and a woman. They passed another bill of similar nature, and the governor vetoed it, one of his 53 vetoes this term. So they then made it with the majority vote, the first Republican majority in 2 houses that we've had in 40 years. They then made it a constitutional amendment. Now, these 2 constitutional amendments will appear on the ballot unless the court intervenes. It costs millions and millions of taxpayer dollars to put these constitutional amendments on the ballot. The other one is anti-gay. I don't know what they call it. I call it anti-gay. The fact of the matter is, I don't think anybody is threatened by having a gay couple living next door. I don't think it's anybody's business. And these are the people who want to keep government out of our personal lives, except when it comes to a woman having an abortion, except when it comes
good health care.
or good health care, except when it comes to two people who choose to marry if they are of the same sex. That's okay. Those intrusions into our lives by government are okay. But health care, as you said, and the things that are really important are unfair. If government wants to say you shouldn't be able to run around with an automatic weapon that fires 100 bullets a minute, your handgun should be sufficient for you, that's an intrusion that the Republicans would say is into our personal lives. Government should stay out of that. But when it comes to health and safety, because that is a safety issue, and we've seen tragedies nearby in Colorado, in Wisconsin, recently, it makes no sense to me. Now, your opponent pretty much runs down the line with the Republican thinking in that regard.
Exactly. I mean, I've seen nothing to the contrary. And I was, again, talking to somebody the other night, and we were discussing that Colorado incident. And and I guess I'm of the opinion, as was she, that again, we're seeing some really terrible things happening. But I think so many people now are under stress, and we really don't have health care for everybody. That maybe, perhaps they should be under some type of medical care. Maybe they needed some type of treatments, etc., to stabilize them. But we're in a society right now that's not really possible all the time. And then we have situations like this that
the Republicans
it's just
would
terrible.
privatize health care, as they tried to privatize Minnesota Care, which cares for the poor and the indigent in our society, and they would throw them out literally into the street. They would throw them onto the public, I don't know what, because they would take away welfare from them, so I don't know what's left.
And that is the deal. And yet, when I'm talking with people, again, they have no problems with their money going to help those that are less fortunate, with the elderly. And so, I just don't understand how some of these people are getting into office if that's the case. And my thought is, going forward, knowing that we have had a legislature where people drew the line in the sand fairly early. I was talking to a legislator, I think he said he'd been there for 18 years. He's never seen a legislature draw a line in the sand so early in the process. So many of the people that were elected 2 years ago, they knew what they wanted to do. They just saw no reason to negotiate, to compromise, to get the job done.
And we've been talking with Sandy Masin, who is a voice of conscience in District 51A, and will be on the ballot in the fall. Sandy, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so very, very much.